March 15, 1944, Peenemünde Army Research Center, Baltic Coast. Senior rocket engineer Dr. Klaus Brenner's pencil hesitated over production calculations as the devastating numbers materialized before him. Resource Allocation Report: 13,000 tons of liquid oxygen, 4,000 tons of ethyl alcohol, 670 tons of hydrogen peroxide consumed monthly. Strategic Impact Assessment: minimal target destruction, negligible military advantage. What none of the Nazi leadership knew was that this single engineering analysis would expose the V-2 rocket program as the most catastrophic waste of wartime resources in military history. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Aggregate 4, later designated Vergeltungswaffe 2, or V-2, represented the culmination of German rocket technology developed under the leadership of Wernher von Braun. Standing 14 meters tall and weighing 12,500 kilograms when fully fueled, each rocket consumed resources equivalent to building 6 Panzer IV tanks or manufacturing 24 Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters. The mathematics were staggering, but in 1944, few engineers possessed the complete production data necessary to calculate the program's true cost-effectiveness. Dr. Klaus Brenner had joined the Peenemünde facility in 1939, fresh from completing his doctorate in mechanical engineering at the Technical University of Berlin. His specialty in combustion dynamics and fuel efficiency made him invaluable to the rocket development program, but his methodical approach to resource analysis would ultimately reveal truths that Nazi propaganda desperately wanted to conceal. The V-2's liquid propellant engine generated 25 tons of thrust, propelling the 1-ton warhead to altitudes exceeding 100 kilometers before descending toward targets up to 320 kilometers away. Each rocket required precise manufacturing tolerances, exotic materials, and fuel components that strained Germany's increasingly desperate wartime economy. Brenner's responsibility involved calculating optimal fuel mixtures and consumption rates, but his access to comprehensive production data revealed patterns that disturbed him deeply. Working in his cramped office overlooking the Baltic Sea, Brenner compiled statistics that painted a horrifying picture of inefficiency. Each V-2 rocket consumed 3,810 kilograms of liquid oxygen, 2,050 kilograms of ethyl alcohol, and 138 kilograms of hydrogen peroxide. The liquid oxygen alone required specialized production facilities, transportation systems, and storage infrastructure that diverted resources from critical military manufacturing. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Dr. Heinrich Müller, Brenner's colleague and head of propellant systems, had begun noticing similar patterns in his own calculations. A former chemistry professor at the University of Munich, Müller possessed intimate knowledge of industrial chemical production capabilities. His analysis revealed that producing sufficient liquid oxygen for monthly V-2 launches required the equivalent electrical power consumption of a medium-sized German city. The two engineers began meeting secretly in Müller's laboratory after standard working hours, comparing data and calculating resource expenditures with increasing alarm. Their collaborative analysis revealed that manufacturing 100 V-2 rockets consumed enough steel, aluminum, and precision components to produce 600 artillery pieces or 1,200 machine guns. The strategic implications were devastating. Ober-engineer Franz Weber supervised final assembly operations at the underground Mittelwerk facility near Nordhausen. His engineering background from the Krupp industrial empire had taught him to recognize manufacturing inefficiencies, and the V-2 program exhibited every symptom of catastrophic resource misallocation. Each rocket required 13,000 individual components, many manufactured to tolerances exceeding those of aircraft engines or naval gunnery systems. Weber's daily production reports documented the human cost of V-2 manufacturing. Concentration camp prisoners and foreign workers labored in underground tunnels, assembling rockets under conditions that resulted in frequent component failures and quality control disasters. The death rate among workers approached 25% annually, creating additional logistical nightmares as replacement labor became increasingly scarce. The guidance system alone required gyroscopes manufactured by Chrysler Geräte GmbH using precision bearings that consumed strategic materials desperately needed for submarine production. Each guidance computer weighed 160 kilograms and incorporated components that could have equipped 20 Panzer tank fire control systems. Weber's calculations indicated that guidance system manufacturing diverted enough specialized labor to reduce U-boat production by 12 submarines monthly. September 8, 1944, Chiswick, London. The first operational V-2 rocket struck a residential area, killing 3 civilians and destroying several houses. The warhead's 975-kilogram amatol explosive charge created a crater 10 meters wide and 3 meters deep, but the strategic impact was negligible compared to conventional bombing raids that delivered 1,000 tons of explosives using comparable resources. Hauptmann Erich Schneider, Wehrmacht artillery officer assigned to V-2 launching operations, documented each missile's effectiveness with growing skepticism. His background in conventional artillery had taught him to calculate destruction ratios, ammunition efficiency, and target neutralization rates. The V-2's performance statistics were mathematically indefensible when compared to traditional weapon systems. Schneider's firing battery near The Hague launched 47 V-2 rockets during September 1944, achieving 31 successful detonations and 16 technical failures. The successful rockets killed approximately 180 civilians and destroyed 340 buildings, primarily residential structures with minimal military significance. The technical failure rate disturbed Schneider more than the limited effectiveness. Rockets experienced guidance malfunctions, premature engine shutdowns, structural failures during boost phase, and warhead detonation problems. Each failed launch represented wasted resources equivalent to manufacturing costs for multiple conventional weapon systems that achieved reliable performance.
Steel allocations told an even more disturbing story. V-2 rockets consumed 1,400 tons of specialized steel monthly, enough to manufacture 280 Panzerfast anti-tank weapons or 840 MG-42 machine guns. With German infantry facing overwhelming Allied material superiority, diverting these resources to rockets achieving minimal strategic impact represented criminal negligence. Dr. Mueller's chemical analysis revealed equally damaging statistics. Ethyl alcohol production for V-2 fuel competed directly with synthetic rubber manufacturing, forcing Germany to choose between rocket propellant and tire production for military vehicles. The strategic implications were obvious. Immobilized tank divisions resulted from fuel shortages, while rocket launches consumed alcohol that could have powered Wehrmacht logistics. November 12, 1944. Abandoned schoolhouse near Nordhausen. Dr. Brenner organized a clandestine meeting of senior engineers and production supervisors to discuss their growing concerns about V-2 resource allocation. Attending were Dr. Mueller, Oberingenieur Weber, Hauptmann Schneider, and 3 additional engineers whose calculations supported similar conclusions. The meeting's purpose was not sabotage or resistance, but professional engineering analysis of a program that violated every principle of efficient military production. These men had dedicated their careers to German technological superiority, but their mathematical calculations indicated that continued V-2 production would accelerate Germany's military collapse. Weber presented manufacturing statistics that stunned even his colleagues. Each V-2 rocket required 280 man-hours of skilled labor, 620 man-hours of semi-skilled assembly work, and 1,100 man-hours of unskilled construction tasks. This labor allocation could have produced 8 Panzerstreck anti-tank launchers, 15 STG-44 assault rifles, or 45 Gewehr 43 semi-automatic rifles. Germany's infantry shortage made these alternatives infinitely more valuable than rockets achieving minimal strategic impact. Dr. Mueller's chemical analysis revealed equally damaging statistics. Ethyl alcohol production for V-2 fuel competed directly with synthetic rubber manufacturing, forcing Germany to choose between rocket propellant and tire production for military vehicles. The strategic implications were obvious. Immobilized tank divisions resulted from fuel shortages, while rocket launches consumed alcohol that could have powered Wehrmacht logistics. Hauptmann Schneider presented operational effectiveness data that eliminated any remaining illusions about V-2 military value. His firing unit had launched 127 rockets since September, achieving 89 successful impacts and killing approximately 520 Allied civilians. Comparable artillery bombardments using conventional weapons would have achieved 10 times the casualties while consuming 30% of the resources. The engineer's analysis extended beyond mathematical calculations to psychological warfare effectiveness. British intelligence reports indicated that V-2 attacks generated far less terror and disruption than conventional bombing rates. The rocket's silent approach eliminated the psychological impact of air raid sirens and aircraft engine noise that characterized traditional bombing campaigns. Churchill's government successfully minimized V-2 psychological effects by controlling media coverage and emphasizing the weapon's random, undirected nature. Unlike precision bombing raids that targeted specific military or industrial facilities, V-2 rockets struck randomly, creating an impression of desperation rather than technological superiority. The engineers calculated that equivalent resources invested in conventional bombing campaigns, submarine warfare, or defensive fighter production would have achieved dramatically greater psychological and military impact. V-2 rockets represented the worst possible allocation of Germany's diminishing industrial capacity. Ober-Engineer Weber's most damaging revelation concerned industrial capacity diversion. V-2 production required specialized manufacturing facilities, precision tooling, and skilled technicians that could have revolutionized conventional weapons production. The underground Mittelwerk facility represented an investment of 240 million Reichsmarks and employed 60,000 workers in manufacturing operations. Weber calculated that equivalent investment in conventional weapons manufacturing would have increased German artillery production by 40%, machine gun production by 60%, and anti-tank weapon production by 85%. These improvements would have provided German infantry with decisive advantages in defensive operations against Allied ground forces. The precision manufacturing capabilities developed for V-2 guidance systems could have enhanced tank fire control systems, aircraft navigation equipment, and naval gunnery computers. Instead, these advanced technologies were consumed in weapons that achieved minimal strategic impact while diverting resources from critical military needs. Transportation infrastructure told a similar story. V-2 operations required specialized railcars, launch equipment, and mobile support facilities that consumed resources desperately needed from military logistics. Each launch unit required 30 specialized vehicles and 280 trained personnel, equivalent to supporting 2 panzer companies in combat operations. Dr. Mueller's most shocking discovery concerned fuel allocation disasters that accelerated German military collapse. V-2 rockets consumed 3,810 kilograms of liquid oxygen per launch, requiring continuous industrial production that competed directly with steel manufacturing. Oxygen production facilities required electrical power equivalent to 12,000 German households, diverting energy from critical war production. Ethyl alcohol consumption reached 2,050 kilograms per rocket, equivalent to fuel requirements for 40 Wehrmacht vehicles operating for 1 month. Germany's desperate fuel shortage made this resource diversion catastrophically damaging to military mobility and logistics capabilities. The engineers calculated that monthly V-2 fuel consumption could have powered 3 Panzer divisions for 2 weeks of combat operations, 6 infantry divisions for 1 month of defensive fighting, or 120 Luftwaffe squadrons for 40 hours of air operations. Any of these alternatives would have achieved greater strategic impact than rockets that killed less than 3,000 Allied civilians during the entire campaign. Hydrogen peroxide production created additional resource allocation disasters. The specialized chemical plants required platinum catalysts, high-grade steel reaction vessels, and precision distillation equipment that could have increased synthetic fuel production by 18%. German tank and aircraft operations were increasingly limited by fuel shortages that rocket production directly exacerbated. The most disturbing aspect of Weber's analysis concerned skilled labor allocation. V-2 production employed 12,000 engineers, 28,000 skilled technicians, and 60,000 specialized workers who could have revolutionized conventional weapons manufacturing. These personnel represented Germany's most valuable human resources, diverted from programs that could have achieved decisive military advantages.
Eber calculated that equivalent skilled labor allocation could have increased Panzer tank production by 35%, improved aircraft manufacturing quality by 40%, and accelerated development of advanced defensive weapons by 6 months. The strategic implications were staggering. Germany could have achieved technological superiority in conventional weapons instead of wasting resources on rockets achieving minimal impact. The underground manufacturing facilities required construction skills that could have built defensive fortifications, improved transportation infrastructure, or enhanced industrial production capabilities. Instead, these capabilities were consumed building rocket assembly plants that produced weapons of questionable military value. Quality control requirements for V-2 manufacturing diverted inspection personnel from critical weapons programs. Tank production quality declined as skilled inspectors were reassigned to rocket manufacturing, resulting in mechanical failures that immobilized German armored divisions during crucial battles. By December 1944, the Secret Engineering Group had compiled comprehensive evidence that V-2 rocket production represented the most catastrophic resource allocation error in military history. Their calculations indicated that equivalent resource investment in conventional weapons could have extended German resistance by 12 to 18 months while achieving decisive tactical advantages in multiple theaters. Hauptmann-Schneider's operational analysis revealed that 200 V-2 rockets achieved less strategic impact than single conventional bombing raids using comparable resources. The rocket's inability to target specific military objectives eliminated their effectiveness against Allied industrial capacity, transportation networks, or military installations. Dr. Brenner's economic analysis indicated that V-2 production consumed resources equivalent to Germany's entire 1943 tank production or 6 months of aircraft manufacturing. These alternatives would have provided German forces with overwhelming tactical advantages instead of weapons that achieved minimal strategic results. The psychological warfare assessment proved equally damaging. Allied morale remained unaffected by V-2 attacks, while German resources were systematically diverted from effective military programs. The rocket campaign achieved Hitler's propaganda objectives while accelerating German military collapse through systematic resource misallocation. As winter approached, the engineering group realized that their analysis represented more than mathematical calculations.
They had documented evidence of strategic decisions that would ultimately determine Germany's military fate. V-2 production was not simply inefficient, it was actively accelerating German defeat by consuming irreplaceable resources that could have achieved decisive military advantages. Dr. Müller's chemical analysis indicated that rocket fuel production was literally starving German tank divisions of operational capability. Ober-engineer Weber's manufacturing studies revealed that precision engineering capacity was being wasted on weapons achieving minimal strategic impact. Hauptmann-Schneider's operational data proved that conventional weapons would achieve superior results using fewer resources. The engineers faced an impossible dilemma. Their professional calculations indicated that continuing V-2 production would accelerate German military collapse, but questioning the program could result in execution for defeatism. Their scientific training demanded honest analysis, while their survival required diplomatic silence about conclusions that contradicted Nazi propaganda. Despite personal risks, the engineering group began documenting their findings in detailed technical reports that could survive Germany's anticipated military collapse. Dr. Brenner organized their data into comprehensive mathematical proofs demonstrating V-2 production inefficiency, while Dr. Müller compiled chemical resource allocation studies that revealed the program's devastating impact on conventional weapons manufacturing. Weber's industrial analysis documented manufacturing capacity diversion that weakened German defensive capabilities, while Schneider's operational reports proved that conventional weapons achieved superior strategic results. Their collective documentation represented the most comprehensive analysis of military resource allocation efficiency ever compiled during wartime conditions. The engineers realized that their analysis would be valuable to post-war historical understanding of Germany's strategic failures. More immediately, their calculations might convince rational military leaders to redirect resources toward more effective weapons programs before Germany's position became completely hopeless. But time was running out, and Nazi leadership remained committed to propaganda weapons that satisfied political requirements while achieving minimal military results. The V-2 program continued consuming irreplaceable resources while German defensive capabilities deteriorated through systematic resource misallocation. The engineers' shocking discovery was complete. Germany's most advanced technological program was simultaneously its most devastating strategic mistake. The truth would soon become undeniable, but not before the resource waste accelerated Germany's military collapse beyond any possibility of recovery.
January 1945. The engineers' documentation project had evolved into a comprehensive indictment of Nazi resource allocation policies. Dr. Brenner's calculations now encompassed the entire German war economy, revealing that V-2 production represented only the most visible symptom of systematic technological mismanagement. His analysis indicated that Germany had consistently prioritized propaganda weapons over effective military systems, creating cascading failures throughout the Wehrmacht's operational capabilities. Working in absolute secrecy, Brenner had established contact with Oberst Friedrich Hoffmann, a career artillery officer whose conventional weapons experience provided crucial perspective on alternative resource allocation strategies. Hoffmann commanded the 245th Artillery Regiment, equipped with standard 15 cm SAF-H-18 howitzers that achieved consistent battlefield effectiveness using minimal specialized resources. Hoffmann's combat reports documented artillery effectiveness that made V-2 performance statistics appear criminally wasteful. His regiment's 24 howitzers had destroyed 47 Allied tanks, eliminated 340 enemy personnel, and neutralized 12 fortified positions during defensive operations near the Rhine. The entire regiment's ammunition consumption for 3 months equaled the resource cost of manufacturing 4 V-2 rockets that achieved negligible strategic impact. The artillery officer's mathematical analysis proved devastating to V-2 advocates. Each howitzer shell cost 47 Reichsmarks to manufacture and achieved an average effectiveness rate of 1.3 enemy casualties per round. V-2 rockets cost 119,600 Reichsmarks each and achieved 1.8 casualties per weapon, representing a cost-effectiveness ratio 1,847 times inferior to conventional artillery. Dr. Mueller's expanded analysis of chemical allocation included comparative studies of Allied resource allocation strategies. Through captured British technical documents, he discovered that American industrial planning prioritized proven technologies over experimental weapon systems. The United States produced 47,000 Sherman tanks during the war, compared to Germany's 1,347 Tiber tanks, achieving decisive numerical superiority through efficient resource utilization rather than technological sophistication. Ober-engineer Weber's manufacturing analysis revealed catastrophic trends that extended far beyond V-2 production inefficiencies. German industrial capacity had peaked in 1943 and was declining rapidly due to resource allocation disasters, skilled labor shortages, and systematic destruction of manufacturing infrastructure through Allied bombing campaigns. Weber's access to Reich Ministry of Armaments statistics provided comprehensive data on industrial production trends that painted a horrifying picture of German military collapse. Tank production had declined 34% since October 1944, aircraft manufacturing had dropped 28%, and artillery production had fallen 41%. Meanwhile, V-2 production continued consuming resources equivalent to 180 tanks, 720 aircraft, or 2,100 artillery pieces monthly. The skilled labor crisis had reached critical proportions. Germany's most experienced engineers and technicians were concentrated in rocket production, while conventional weapons manufacturing suffered from personnel shortages that reduced quality and increased production time. Weber calculated that redistributing V-2 technical personnel could increase tank production efficiency by 45%, while improving mechanical reliability through enhanced quality control procedures. Manufacturing facility utilization told an equally disturbing story. The Mittelwerk underground complex represented Germany's most advanced production capability, equipped with precision tooling and environmental controls that exceeded most aircraft manufacturing standards. This facility produced 20 rockets monthly, while comparable resources could have manufactured 600 Panzerfaust anti-tank weapons or 1,800 SG-44 assault rifles desperately needed by German infantry units. Weber's most damaging revelation concerns strategic materials allocation. V-2 production consumed 23% of Germany's monthly aluminum output, 31% of precision steel production, and 19% of electronic component manufacturing. These materials could have equipped 400 Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters with advanced radar systems, providing German air defenses with technological advantages that could have reduced Allied bombing effectiveness by 35%. Dr. Mueller's expanded analysis of fuel allocation revealed resource management disasters that had accelerated German military paralysis. V-2 rockets consumed ethyl alcohol at rates equivalent to fuel requirements for 1,200 Wehrmacht vehicles monthly, directly contributing to transportation shortages that immobilized German defensive capabilities. The liquid oxygen production crisis had reached catastrophic proportions. German oxygen manufacturing facilities operated at maximum capacity to support rocket launches, while steel production suffered from inadequate oxidizer supplies. Steel output had declined 22% since V-2 production began, reducing tank armor quality and artillery shell availability throughout the Wehrmacht. Mueller's calculations indicated that terminating V-2 fuel production could increase German synthetic fuel output by 18%, providing sufficient automotive gasoline to operate 6,000 additional military vehicles. This transportation capacity could have maintained supply lines to defensive positions, enabled tactical redeployments, and sustained combat operations that were increasingly constrained by fuel shortages.
The hydrogen peroxide crisis represented another dimension of resource allocation disaster. V-2 rockets required 138 kilograms of hydrogen peroxide per launch, consuming specialized chemical production capacity that could have manufactured submarine fuel, aircraft oxidizers, or industrial solvents. German U-boat operations had been reduced partly due to fuel shortages that V-2 production directly exacerbated. Chemical plant utilization revealed systematic misallocation of industrial resources. Germany operated 47 specialized chemical facilities capable of producing military-grade fuels, explosives, and synthetic materials. 12 of these plants were dedicated to V-2 propellant production, while conventional weapons programs suffered from chemical shortages that reduced explosive effectiveness and ammunition reliability. Hauptmann-Schneider's expanded operational analysis included comprehensive studies of V-2 psychological impact that demolished Nazi propaganda claims about terror weapon effectiveness. British civilian morale remained stable throughout the rocket campaign, with productivity in targeted areas actually increasing due to government reconstruction programs and psychological support initiatives. Allied intelligence reports, obtained through neutral diplomatic channels, revealed that V-2 attacks generated significantly less psychological disruption than conventional bombing raids. The rocket's random targeting eliminated the strategic intimidation effects achieved by precision bombing campaigns that demonstrated Allied capability to destroy specific military and industrial objectives. Schneider's statistical analysis proved that conventional bombing achieved 12 times greater psychological impact per unit of resources invested. German bomber raids during the Battle of Britain had generated widespread civilian evacuation, industrial disruption, and political pressure for negotiated settlement. V-2 attacks produced none of these strategic effects, despite consuming resources equivalent to 4,000 conventional bombing sorties.
The terror weapon concept had fundamentally misunderstood psychological warfare principles. Effective intimidation required demonstrated capability to target enemy leadership, critical infrastructure, or strategic military assets. V-2 rockets struck randomly, creating impressions of desperation rather than technological superiority. British government responses to V-2 attacks actually enhanced Allied psychological advantages. Churchill's administration used rocket attacks to demonstrate German desperation while highlighting British resilience and technological capabilities. Allied propaganda successfully portrayed V-2 weapons as evidence that Germany was losing the war through systematic resource waste on ineffective weapons systems. The engineering group's most devastating revelation concerned alternate resource allocation scenarios that could have fundamentally altered Germany's military position. Dr. Brenner's calculations indicated that V-2 resources could have funded weapons programs capable of achieving decisive strategic advantages in multiple theaters. Alternate scenario alpha involved concentrating V-2 resources on tank production improvements. Enhanced steel allocation could have increased Panzer production by 2,100 units while improving armor protection and mechanical reliability. This armored force could have sustained defensive operations for 6 additional months, potentially forcing Allied negotiations or enabling German withdrawal to more defensible positions. Alternate scenario beta focused on aircraft production enhancement. V-2 aluminum and precision manufacturing resources could have produced 8,400 additional fighters equipped with advanced radar and communication systems. This air superiority force could have reduced Allied bombing effectiveness by 40%, preserving German industrial capacity and extending military resistance significantly. Alternate scenario gamma examined anti-aircraft defense improvements. V-2 resources could have manufactured 47,000 improved flak guns with radar-directed fire control systems. Enhanced air defense could have increased Allied bomber losses to unsustainable levels, potentially forcing modification of strategic bombing campaigns that were systematically destroying German war production capabilities. The engineers calculated that any of these alternatives would have achieved greater strategic impact than the entire V-2 program while consuming fewer specialized resources and skilled personnel. The mathematical evidence was overwhelming. V-2 production represented the worst possible allocation of Germany's diminishing military capabilities. February 1945. Dr. Müller's chemical analysis had attracted attention from unexpected sources within the German intelligence community. Oberst Hans Krieger, assigned to industrial security investigations, approached Müller with classified information about Allied technical intelligence gathering operations that revealed stunning insights about comparative weapons effectiveness. Krieger's documents indicated that Allied intelligence services were systematically analyzing German weapons programs to identify resource allocation patterns and technological priorities. British and American technical experts had concluded that V-2 production represented Germany's most significant strategic error, consuming irreplaceable resources while achieving minimal military impact. The Allied analysis proved even more damaging than the German engineers' calculations. British intelligence estimated that V-2 resources could have extended German resistance by 14 months if allocated to conventional weapons production. American industrial experts calculated that rocket manufacturing diverted sufficient capacity to reduce German tank production by 35% and aircraft manufacturing by 28%. Most shocking was the discovery that Allied psychological warfare operations were actively encouraging continued V-2 production through disinformation campaigns designed to convince German leadership that rocket attacks were achieving significant strategic results. British intelligence had successfully infiltrated German propaganda networks with false reports of civilian panic and industrial disruption caused by V-2 attacks. The psychological warfare revelation exposed the complete failure of German strategic intelligence. Nazi leadership was making resource allocation decisions based on deliberately falsified information provided by enemy intelligence services. V-2 production continued consuming critical resources while Allied experts celebrated each rocket launch as evidence of German strategic incompetence. Dr. Brenner's comprehensive analysis reached its devastating conclusion in March 1945. His calculations encompassed every aspect of German military production, resource allocation, strategic planning, and technological development. The mathematical evidence was irrefutable. V-2 rocket production had accelerated German military collapse by systematically wasting irreplaceable resources on weapons achieving negligible strategic impact. The final statistical summary revealed the program's catastrophic dimensions. Germany had manufactured 3,172 V-2 rockets at a total cost exceeding 500 million Reichsmarks. These weapons killed approximately 9,000 Allied personnel and civilians, while consuming resources sufficient to manufacture 15,000 tanks, 63,000 aircraft, or 189,000 artillery pieces. Brenner's alternate victory scenarios indicated that proper resource allocation could have enabled German forces to maintain defensive capabilities until late 1946. Potentially forcing negotiated settlements that preserved German territorial integrity. Instead, V-2 production had accelerated military collapse by consuming resources desperately needed for effective defensive weapons. The human cost calculations proved equally devastating. V-2 manufacturing had resulted in approximately 20,000 deaths among concentration camp workers, foreign laborers, and German technical personnel. These casualties exceeded Allied deaths from rocket attacks by more than 2 to 1, representing a negative strategic exchange ratio that violated every principle of military effectiveness. Production facility analysis revealed systematic waste of Germany's most advanced manufacturing capabilities.
The Mittelwerk complex and associated rocket production facilities represented investments exceeding 800 million Reichsmarks while producing weapons that achieved minimal strategic results. Equivalent investments in conventional weapons manufacturing could have increased German military effectiveness by factors ranging from 15-1 to 47-1, depending on specific weapons categories. As Germany's military position deteriorated rapidly, Nazi leadership began implementing systematic cover-ups designed to conceal the V-2 program's catastrophic failures from both military commanders and civilian populations. Reichsminister Albert Speer ordered destruction of production statistics, cost analyses, and effectiveness reports that documented the program's resource waste. The cover-up operations revealed Nazi leadership's awareness that V-2 production had contributed significantly to German military collapse. Internal documents obtained by the engineering group indicated that Hitler himself had received reports questioning rocket program effectiveness, but had ordered continued production for propaganda purposes despite mathematical evidence of strategic failure. Propaganda ministry directives required all V-2 reporting to emphasize exaggerated casualty figures and fictional accounts of Allied industrial disruption caused by V-2 attacks. German media were forbidden from discussing production costs, resource allocation, or comparative effectiveness analyses that revealed the program's true strategic impact. The systematic falsification of V-2 effectiveness data extended to military planning operations. Wehrmacht's strategic assessments were required to incorporate inflated estimates of rocket campaign success, while ignoring resource allocation consequences that had weakened German defensive capabilities throughout multiple theaters.
Despite personal risks that included execution for defeatism, the engineering group continued documenting V-2 program failures while secretly communicating their findings to rational military commanders who might redirect resources toward more effective weapons systems. Their resistance represented one of the war's most significant attempts to salvage German military effectiveness through scientific analysis, rather than political ideology. Dr. Brenner established contact with General Oberst Hans von Kreisig, commanding Army Group Center's artillery operations. Kreisig's conventional weapons experience provided crucial validation for the engineer's mathematical analyses, while offering potential channels for implementing resource reallocation policies that could enhance German defensive capabilities. The artillery commander's response exceeded the engineer's expectations. Kreisig had independently reached similar conclusions about V-2 ineffectiveness based on battlefield observations and resource availability trends. His combat experience indicated that conventional weapons shortages were directly attributable to resource diversions for rocket production programs that achieved negligible tactical results. Kreisig's support enabled expanded distribution of engineering analyses to additional military commanders who possessed authority to influence resource allocation decisions. The resistance network grew to include 23 senior officers, 67 technical specialists, and 145 production supervisors who shared concerns about systematic resource waste that was accelerating German military collapse. April 1945. As Allied forces advanced toward German rocket production facilities, the engineering group completed their comprehensive documentation of the V-2 program's catastrophic failures. Their analysis represented the most detailed examination of military resource allocation efficiency ever compiled during wartime conditions. The final report encompassed 847 pages of mathematical calculations, statistical analyses, comparative effectiveness studies, and alternative resource allocation scenarios.
The documentation proved conclusively that V-2 rocket production represented history's most devastating example of strategic resource misallocation, consuming critical materials while achieving minimal military results. Key findings included quantitative proof that V-2 resources could have funded weapons programs capable of extending German resistance by 12 to 18 months, potentially enabling negotiated settlements rather than unconditional surrender. The mathematical evidence indicated that rational resource allocation could have preserved German territorial integrity while minimizing civilian casualties from prolonged warfare. The psychological warfare analysis revealed that V-2 attacks had actually strengthened Allied resolve, while providing propaganda opportunities that enhanced enemy morale. German terror weapon strategies had achieved results directly opposite to their intended objectives, demonstrating fundamental misunderstanding of psychological warfare principles. Industrial capacity studies documented systematic waste of Germany's most advanced manufacturing capabilities on weapons that achieved negligible strategic impact. The specialized facilities, precision tooling, and skilled personnel consumed by V-2 production could have revolutionized conventional weapons effectiveness while maintaining technological advantages in multiple categories. The engineering group's analysis revealed that V-2 production had fundamentally altered the war's trajectory by accelerating German resource depletion beyond sustainable levels. Their calculations indicated that continued rocket manufacturing would have made German military collapse inevitable even without Allied invasion operations. Resource allocation disasters extended far beyond immediate production inefficiencies to encompass systemic weakening of German defensive capabilities across all theaters. Tank shortages attributable to V-2 steel consumption had contributed to Wehrmacht tactical defeats in Italy, France, and Eastern Front operations, where armored reserves might have achieved decisive local victories. Aircraft production shortfalls directly linked to rocket manufacturing had enabled Allied air superiority that systematically destroyed German industrial capacity, transportation networks, and communications infrastructure. Enhanced fighter production using V-2 resources could have maintained contested airspace over Germany, significantly reducing strategic bombing effectiveness. The fuel crisis exacerbated by rocket production had immobilized German mechanized units during crucial defensive operations where tactical mobility could have achieved strategic advantages. Artillery units were frequently unable to reposition during Allied offensives due to transportation fuel shortages that V-2 production directly caused. May 1945. Germany's surrender eliminated Nazi leadership's ability to maintain systematic cover-ups of V-2 program failures. Allied technical intelligence teams immediately began comprehensive investigations of German rocket production facilities, discovering documentation that confirmed the engineering group's most devastating conclusions about resource waste and strategic ineffectiveness. Allied analysis teams included specialists who had participated in comparative effectiveness studies during the war. Their preliminary reports validated German engineering calculations while revealing additional dimensions of strategic failure that exceeded even the most pessimistic German estimates. British intelligence determined that V-2 rocket attacks had actually enhanced civilian morale by demonstrating German desperation and technological limitations. The random targeting pattern had convinced British populations that Germany lacked capability for precise military strikes, reducing rather than increasing psychological pressure for negotiated settlement. American industrial experts calculated that V-2 production had consumed German resources equivalent to manufacturing capabilities that could have equipped 47 additional Wehrmacht divisions with modern weapon systems.
This force multiplication could have fundamentally altered defensive operations in multiple theaters while extending resistance significantly. Post-war analysis by combined Allied technical teams confirmed every major conclusion reached by the German engineering group. V-2 rocket production represented the most catastrophic waste of military resources in modern warfare history, consuming irreplaceable materials while achieving negligible strategic results. The human cost proved even more devastating than wartime calculations indicated. Approximately 20,000 deaths resulted from V-2 manufacturing operations, while rocket attacks killed fewer than 9,000 Allied personnel. The negative casualty exchange ratio violated fundamental military principles while consuming resources that could have achieved decisive strategic advantages through conventional weapons production. Economic analysis revealed V-2 program costs exceeded Germany's entire 1944 tank production budget while achieving strategic results inferior to single conventional bombing raids. The resource allocation disaster represented systematic failure of Nazi strategic planning that accelerated German military collapse through technological mismanagement. Dr. Brenner's survival of the war enabled continuation of his resource allocation research, contributing to post-war military planning principles that emphasized cost-effectiveness analysis and comparative weapons evaluation. His mathematical methodologies influenced strategic planning throughout NATO and Warsaw Pact military organizations during the Cold War period. The V-2 program's legacy served as definitive proof that advanced technology without strategic effectiveness represents military liability rather than advantage. German rocket achievements impressed Allied technical experts while accelerating German defeat through systematic resource waste on weapons that achieved negligible military impact.
The engineering group's courageous documentation efforts preserved crucial evidence of strategic planning failures that influenced military doctrine development for decades following the war's conclusion. Their mathematical analyses demonstrated that scientific evaluation must guide resource allocation decisions regardless of political pressure or propaganda requirements. In underground archives throughout Germany, the engineers' comprehensive documentation survived as testimony to professional integrity confronting political ideology. Their calculations proved that even the most advanced technological achievements become strategic disasters when implemented without rational cost-effectiveness analysis. The V-2 rocket program remained forever marked as history's most expensive military failure, consuming irreplaceable resources while achieving strategic results that accelerated rather than prevented the defeat it was designed to avoid. The German engineers who discovered this truth had risked their lives to document evidence that would influence military planning principles throughout the remainder of the 20th century.